They threw her out of an apartment, not knowing she owned the entire building. This is the story of Leora Adeyemi, the sister they called a failure, the woman who built a $2.5 million empire in silence. When pride slammed the door in her face, she unlocked a truth they were never ready to hear. Because sometimes, power doesn't shout. It just signs the deed. Sparkles, before we begin, hit subscribe, drop a hello in the comments, and tell us where you're watching from, because today's story isn't just about revenge, it's about revelation. The suitcase sat at her feet, its handle trembling beneath her tightening grip. Leora stared at the closed door, the echo of her sister's voice still ringing in her ears. "Get out of my apartment, Leora. You don't belong here anymore." The sound of the lock clicking felt final, like a hammer sealing a coffin. 28 years of sisterhood, laughter, and secrets, reduced to one slammed door. The hallway lights reflected off the marble floors, cold and unwelcoming. Leora's chest rose and fell with shallow breaths as she whispered to herself, "So this is what family feels like." She didn't move at first, just stood there listening to her heartbeat thudding in her ears. When she finally reached into her bag, her phone screen glowed with a calendar reminder. Property management meeting, 2 p.m. She exhaled slowly, irony twisting in her chest. The building her sister had just thrown her out of, every inch of it, belonged to her. 3 months ago, Leora had thought she was doing something kind. Her sister, Amara, had called late one evening, her voice soft and shaky. "Please, Leora, come stay with me. I'm tired of being alone. Mom and Dad are driving me crazy." Leora hadn't hesitated. She'd left her tiny studio across town the next morning, suitcase in hand, believing that maybe, this time, they could rebuild their bond. The apartment had been beautiful, high ceilings, a view of the courtyard, warm light spilling through sheer curtains. Amara had hugged her tightly that first night. "It feels so much better with you here," she'd said. Leora had smiled, believing every word. She didn't know then that Amara's loneliness wasn't about missing family, it was about needing an audience. And soon, the same voice that had begged her to come would become the voice that threw her out. As she stood in the hallway now, Leora wiped her eyes and steadied herself. The air smelled faintly of polish and citrus, details she'd picked herself during renovation. 6 years of work, 6 years of silence, and a secret that had grown heavier each day. She picked up her suitcase, turned from the door, and walked toward the elevator. Instead of pressing the lobby button, she stopped on the ground floor and headed toward a frosted glass door labeled office. Management only. Janet, her building manager, looked up from her desk as Leora entered. "Miss Adeyemi?" Janet's dark brows rose in quiet recognition. "I didn't expect you today." Leora's voice was calm, but her eyes burned. "Change of plans," she said. It's time Amara knew the truth. Janet nodded, already sensing the storm to come. 6 years earlier, Leora had been just another young developer in Lagos, working 80-hour weeks on a small productivity app that barely paid her rent. Her parents had called her unrealistic. Her sister had called her embarrassing. Every family dinner had been a reminder that Amara was the golden child, stylish, charming, adored. Leora, on the other hand, was the one who wasted her degree on games. "You can't make a living typing on a computer all day," their father used to say. "At least your sister understands real work." Amara had laughed, sipping her wine. "Maybe when you're done playing genius, you can join me at the boutique." Leora had smiled politely, swallowed the insult, and kept building her dream. The night her app sold for $8 million, she didn't tell a soul. She'd sat alone in her tiny apartment, crying tears of joy and exhaustion, whispering, "Now they'll never control me again." With her new wealth, Leora could have moved anywhere, Dubai, London, Cape Town, but she stayed. She wanted something lasting, something that couldn't be taken away. When her advisor, Mr. Adebayo, showed her the listing for a crumbling 20-unit building in Ikeja, she'd known instantly it was the one. "It's a risk," he'd warned, laying out the documents on his desk. "Foreclosure, old plumbing, outdated wiring, but if you fix it up, it could triple in value." Leora had smiled faintly. Then let's fix it. She'd signed the papers that same week, buying the entire property for $1.5 million. Over the next 18 months, she poured her heart and another million into renovations, hardwood floors, smart lighting, secured gates, and a landscaped courtyard filled with bougainvillea. When it was done, the building stood gleaming under the sun like a silent victory. Market value: $2.5 million. Ownership: Leora Adeyemi, sole proprietor. Janet had been the only one who knew the truth. She'd managed the tenants, collected the rent, and kept Leora's identity hidden. When Amara's rental application came in, Janet had hesitated. "Boss," she'd said over the phone, "this applicant, she has your last name." Leora's silence stretched before she answered. "She's my sister. Process it like any other." "But her income," Janet began, scanning the form. "She can't afford the rent." "Approve it," Leora said softly. "Lower it by $800. Say it's a special rate for long-term tenants." Janet had paused. "Are you sure? She won't know it's you." "She doesn't need to," Leora replied. "Not yet." It wasn't just kindness, it was curiosity. Leora wanted to see if her sister had changed, if time and struggle had taught her humility. She soon learned that it hadn't. Amara had moved into the freshly painted apartment with a squeal of delight. "Oh my goodness, this is luxury," she'd said, spinning in the living room. "I can't believe I got approved. It's like the universe finally decided to bless me." Leora had watched from her penthouse window, unseen, as the moving truck arrived. She remembered smiling faintly. She'd wanted her sister to have a fresh start. For months, Amara had posted photos on social media. "My new apartment. My hard work paid off." The captions stung a little, but Leora stayed silent. She told herself she didn't need credit, only peace. Still, every photo, every boastful caption, "My luxury apartment in the heart of the city," cut deeper than she admitted. The irony was unbearable. The apartment she called mine was built, paid for, and owned entirely by the sister she dismissed. Over time, the complaints began. Janet would forward them politely. "Amara wants her living room repainted. Says the beige feels dull." Another message followed a week later. "She's demanding we evict the tenant below her because they play jazz music in the evenings." Leora would shake her head, half amused, half disheartened. "Leave it," she told Janet. "As long as they pay rent and follow the rules, they stay." Behind her calm instructions was a quiet ache. Amara hadn't changed. She was still entitled, still blind to everything that didn't serve her comfort. Leora tried to ignore it, focusing on her other projects, an investment startup, a digital mentorship program, but the distance between them felt like a wound that refused to heal. Then one evening, Janet called with something unusual in her voice. "She's behind on rent," she said. 2 months. Leora froze. "Behind?"
"Yes."
"I covered it from the reserve fund, like you instructed for emergencies. But she hasn't paid a kobo in 60 days. Leora's lips tightened. "Let it go for now," she said. "Send her a gentle reminder, not a threat." Janet hesitated. "You sure, boss? If it were anyone else." "It's not anyone else," Leora said quietly. "It's my sister." She hung up and sat by her window, staring down at the courtyard she designed herself. Her sister was living rent-free in her home, boasting online, and still owed her money. Yet, she couldn't bring herself to confront her. Not yet. Family, she thought, was the one debt that never truly got repaid. Months later, her phone rang. It was Amara, the first call in nearly a year. Leora hesitated before answering. "Hey," she said cautiously. "What's going on?" On the other end, Amara sighed dramatically. "Oh, nothing. Just life. It's been hard. The rent went up again. You know how greedy landlords can be." Leora frowned. "The rent didn't go up." She caught herself just in time. "What do you mean?" Amara continued, oblivious. "I was hoping you could help me out a little just for a while. Maybe $500 a month until I get back on track." Leora stared at the ceiling, her jaw tightening. I can't right now, she said evenly. I have my own expenses. Silence. Then a scoff.
Wow.
Of course. The great Leora, always too busy for family. The line went dead, leaving only the quiet hum of truth. For weeks after that call, Leora couldn't shake the sadness. Not because of the insult, but because of how familiar it felt. Every interaction with her family was a cycle: need, guilt, insult, silence. She'd built walls to protect herself, but Amara always found ways to climb them. Still, when the call came 3 months later, in the middle of the night, she answered on the first ring. Please, Leora, I need you. Amara's voice cracked through sobs. Can you come over? What happened? It's Mom and Dad, Amara choked out. They won't stop criticizing me. I can't take it anymore. Leora didn't think twice. She threw on a coat, grabbed her keys, and drove across town. Whatever else her sister was, she was still blood. And blood, no matter how bruised, still pulled. When she arrived, Amara opened the door with swollen eyes and trembling hands. You came, she whispered. Of course, Leora said softly. What's going on? I can't do this alone anymore. She stepped aside, and Leora entered the apartment. Clothes were scattered, half-eaten meals left on the counter, the scent of cheap perfume and stress lingering in the air. You've been crying for hours, Leora said gently. Sit down. I'll make some tea. Amara nodded, collapsing onto the couch. You've always been so calm, she murmured. Even when I'm a mess. Leora smiled faintly. That's what sisters are for. And just like that, the years of resentment seemed to fade for a moment. The next few weeks were unexpectedly peaceful. They cooked together, watched old movies, and laughed about childhood memories. It almost felt like the world had reset, like they'd been given another chance to be the sisters they once were. Amara would vent about her job at the boutique, about annoying customers and lazy coworkers. You wouldn't believe how people talk to retail workers, she'd complain. It's like we're invisible. Leora would listen patiently, biting back the urge to remind her of all the times she'd belittled her for working on that computer nonsense. Instead, she'd smile and say, You deserve better. In those quiet evenings, Leora let herself believe they were healing. But deep down, she knew it wouldn't last. With Amara, peace was just the pause before the next storm. The storm came when their parents visited. It was a Sunday afternoon, the air heavy with unspoken judgment. Leora opened the door to find her father's familiar frown. Didn't know you'd be here, he said. I'm helping Amara out, she replied calmly. Her mother's eyes swept over her outfit, her tone clipped. Still not married, Leora? You're almost 30. Leora bit her tongue. I'm focusing on work. Work, her father muttered, settling into the armchair. You call that tapping at a keyboard all-day work? Amara offered a tight smile. She's just helping out Dad. She doesn't have much going on. The words stung more than she expected. The 3 hours that followed were pure torture, thinly veiled insults disguised as advice. Leora endured them all in silence, her hands folded neatly in her lap. That night, she overheard Amara on the phone. Her voice was low but clear. Yeah, Mom, she's still here. I know. It's pathetic, right? But she means well. Leora froze in the hallway, her stomach twisting. The next morning, she packed her things quietly. She'd made up her mind to leave, to never look back. But just as she zipped her suitcase, there was a soft knock on the door. Amara stood there, eyes puffy and voice trembling. I didn't mean what I said, she whispered. Please don't go. I don't know what's wrong with me sometimes. Leora hesitated. The anger in her chest flickered, replaced by something weaker. Hope. One more chance, she thought. Just one more. She nodded slowly. Okay, I'll stay. Peace lasted 3 more weeks before he arrived. The man who had set everything on fire. His name was Dallin, tall, well-dressed, with a confidence that reeked of arrogance. Amara introduced him one evening over dinner. Leora, this is Dallin, she said with a proud smile. He's the one I told you about. Leora forced a polite nod, offering her hand. Nice to meet you. Dallin glanced at it but didn't shake. So, you're the sister? He said instead, smirking. Heard you're still figuring life out. The comment stung, but Leora kept her face neutral. Something like that. He laughed, turning to Amara.
See?
She's funny. That night, Leora lay awake listening to their laughter through the wall, feeling the atmosphere shift. Peace had officially expired. Soon, Dallin was everywhere, in the kitchen, the living room, the bathroom that used to be hers. He began leaving his clothes in the laundry, his shoes by the door, his cologne in the air. One morning, as Leora reached for her cereal, Dallin leaned against the counter and said, "You know, when I move in next month, we'll need more space." Leora blinked. "You're moving in?" "Of course," he said with a grin. "Amara and I are building a home together. I can't have extra people hanging around." She froze. "Extra people?" "No offense," he added, sipping from her mug. "But maybe it's time you found your own place." Leora's lips parted, but no words came. Every fiber in her wanted to scream the truth. This is my building. But she didn't. Not yet. Days turned into quiet resentment. Dallin treated her like a nuisance, and Amara began to mimic him. They laughed louder when she entered a room. They whispered when she passed. Once, she heard him say, "She's lucky you even let her stay here." Amara didn't disagree. One night, while Leora sat reviewing tenant reports at the kitchen table, Dallin came out of the bedroom shirtless, opening her refrigerator. "Still here," he said lazily. "It's morning," she replied. "Where else would I be?" He chuckled, drinking juice straight from the carton. "You could be anywhere else, your own place, for example." She looked up from her laptop. "Carol," she caught herself, "Amara asked me to stay." "Well, I'm asking you to go," he said coldly. Before she could respond, Amara appeared, draped in a silk robe that used to belong to Leora. "What's going on?" she asked. "Just telling your sister it's time to move out," Dallin said casually. Amara hesitated, then sighed. "He's right, Leora. It's been months. You said this was temporary." Leora blinked, her pulse hammering. "You begged me to come," she reminded her. "You said you needed me." "I was emotional," Amara said dismissively. "I'm better now. And Dallin and I need our space." "When do you want me out?" Leora asked quietly. "Today," Dallin answered before Amara could speak. The room fell silent. "You can't be serious," Leora whispered. "We are," Amara said, crossing her arms. "Don't make this harder." Leora's throat tightened. "So, after everything, this is how it ends?" "Don't be dramatic," Amara sighed. "Take an hour. I'll help you pack." Leora stared at her sister, the same girl who once shared candy with her under the covers, who cried at her graduation, who begged for help at midnight. But now, her eyes were cold.
"Fine," Leora said.
"I'll go." She packed in silence as they whispered in the living room, laughter occasionally breaking through. 45 minutes later, she stood by the door, suitcase in hand. "Did you ever want me here, Amara?" she asked softly. Amara rolled her eyes. "I wanted peace, and for a while, you gave me that. But people grow."
"Move on."
"You should too." And then, with a sharp push, the door closed between them. For a moment, Leora just stood there, listening to her heartbeat echo in the hallway. Her fingers trembled around the handle of her suitcase. Everything felt quiet, too quiet. Then, she took a slow breath and whispered to herself, "It's time." She turned and walked down the corridor toward the elevator, passing the framed art she'd personally chosen years ago. Each piece now felt like part of a secret she'd been guarding too long. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped in, her reflection staring back at her from the mirrored walls. "You did this to yourself," she murmured. "You let them believe they had power."
But that was about to change.
Janet was waiting in her office when Leora arrived. The older woman looked up from her desk, eyes full of concern. "You ready?" she asked. Leora nodded slowly. "More than ready." Janet clicked her keyboard, pulling up a file. "Unit 304, your sister's lease. She's 2 months behind on rent. I've been covering it from the maintenance fund like you asked." Leora's lips parted. She's behind. Yes, Janet said. She owes over $2,000. Should I serve the 30-day notice? Leora paused, thinking about all the times Amara had boasted about her success, the luxury, the independence. She thought about Dallin's smirk, the orange juice he drank straight from her fridge. Then she nodded. Not yet. I'll handle this myself. Janet blinked. You sure you want to do that in person? I'm sure, Leora said. It's time she saw the truth. She gathered the ownership documents into a folder, her name printed boldly at the top. As she walked back to the elevator, her steps grew steadier, her breathing even. This wasn't revenge. It was revelation. When she reached Amara's door, she hesitated only once before knocking, 3 firm raps. Inside, footsteps shuffled. The door opened a crack. Oh, you again, Amara said coolly. Forgot something? Yes, Leora said calmly. My dignity. Amara frowned, confused. What's that supposed to mean? Leora stepped aside, and Janet came forward holding the folder. Good afternoon, Janet began professionally. I'm Janet Osei, property manager. And this is Ms. Leora Adeyemi, the building owner. For a moment, silence filled the hallway. Amara blinked, then laughed. Excuse me? You heard correctly, Janet said. Ms. Adeyemi owns this building. You're 2 months behind on rent, and we're here to discuss your account. Amara's laughter faltered. This is a joke, she said, glancing at Leora. Tell me this is some twisted prank. It's not, Leora said quietly. I bought this building 6 years ago. I renovated it. I approved your application myself and gave you a discount on rent, because you're my sister. The color drained from Amara's face. You're lying, she whispered. You can't own all this. Leora opened the folder and held it out. Every signature, every document, every wall you've leaned against, mine. From the bedroom, Dallin's voice echoed. What's going on? He appeared in the doorway, shirt half-buttoned. Who are you? The woman whose name is on your lease, Leora replied evenly. And the one you've been insulting for months. Dallin blinked, stunned. Wait, you're the landlord? The owner, Janet corrected firmly. This entire property belongs to Ms. Adeyemi. Leora's gaze didn't waver. Every word you said about me being a failure, every time you told me to leave, you were standing in my home. Dallin's mouth opened, but no sound came. Amara's knees weakened. Leora, please, she whispered. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know.
You didn't want to know, Leora said.
It was easier to believe I was beneath you. Amara reached for her sister's hand, but Leora stepped back.
Don't, she said softly.
You pushed me into that hallway. You told me I didn't belong here. I was angry, Amara cried. I didn't mean it. Leora's eyes glistened, but her voice remained steady. You meant every word. You always do. She turned to Janet. Proceed with a 30-day notice. Amara gasped. You can't evict me. I'm your sister. I was your sister, Leora said quietly. But you made me a stranger the day you chose pride over kindness. Dallin stepped forward, scowling. You don't have to do this, lady. I don't, Leora agreed. But I will. Amara's tears came fast. Please, I have nowhere else to go. Mom and Dad can't take me in. You know how they are. Leora studied her for a long moment. She saw not the sister who shared her childhood, but the woman who'd mocked her dreams, used her kindness, and never once said thank you. You'll figure it out, she said. You always said you were the successful one. Prove it. Janet closed the folder. You have 30 days to vacate the premises, she said formally. Dallin muttered a curse under his breath, slamming the bedroom door. Amara fell to her knees, sobbing. I'll tell them, she whispered. I'll tell Mom and Dad what you've done. Do it, Leora said, turning away. Tell them everything. As Leora and Janet walked down the hall, Amara's cries echoed behind them, but Leora didn't stop. Her heart hurt, yes, but not from guilt, from clarity. For the first time, she truly saw her sister. Not as family, but as someone who never wished her well. By the time she reached the courtyard, she inhaled deeply, tasting freedom. Janet glanced at her. "You okay, boss?" Leora nodded slowly. "I'm finally okay." That night, she returned to her penthouse, the one no one knew existed. The city stretched below her, alive and glittering. She poured herself a glass of wine and whispered, "I built all this, and they never knew." For the first time in years, she slept without dreams. The next month passed in silence. Amara didn't call, didn't write, didn't apologize until the final week. "She's moving out," Janet reported. Day 28. "Good," Leora said simply. "Where's she going?" "With Dallin," Janet replied. "They're moving into a studio in Suralere." Leora nodded, unconcerned. But 2 weeks later, Janet called again. "You'll want to hear this," she said. They broke up. He kicked her out. Leora closed her eyes. "And now, she's with your parents, on their couch." The irony almost made her smile. Almost. "Thank you, Janet," she said. "That'll be all." The calls started soon after. Unknown number. Again and again. 147 times in 6 months. Leora never answered. Her mother tried next, her father after that. Each voicemail began the same. "Leora, we didn't know. Please, let's talk." She deleted them all. It wasn't anger, it was self-preservation. For years, she'd been the family's invisible foundation, supporting them quietly while they built castles of pride on her back. Now she was done. She owed them nothing. She'd spent her whole life begging for belonging. This time, she chose peace instead. 6 months later, she ran into Amara at a grocery store. The once glamorous sister looked smaller somehow, thinner, eyes shadowed with regret. For a moment, their gazes locked across the aisle. Amara's lips parted. "Leora." But before she could finish, Leora turned away. No words. No confrontation. Just distance. Sometimes silence said everything. Amara didn't follow. She just stood there, clutching a basket of instant noodles and cheap coffee, watching the sister she'd thrown away walk past with quiet grace. At home, Leora stood by her window, looking out over the courtyard below. Children played by the fountain, neighbors laughed on balconies, and light spilled warmly from every window. The building was alive, filled with people who respected her, who greeted her by name, who paid their rent on time. Every tenant felt like family, the kind she'd chosen herself. She hosted barbecues in the summer, potlucks in December, and knew the stories of each family that lived there. The sound of laughter replaced the silence that once haunted her halls. One evening, as she walked through the courtyard, a little girl ran up to her. "Miss Leora, Mama says thank you for fixing the lights." Leora bent down with a smile. "Tell Mama she's welcome, okay?" The girl grinned, skipping away. Watching her, Leora felt a peace she hadn't known before, the kind that didn't need validation or approval. She had built a home not just for herself, but for others who needed one. Her pain had become her foundation. Her loneliness, her strength. Inside her penthouse, framed on the wall, hung the original building blueprint, the same one she'd signed 6 years ago. Below it was a plaque, Adeyemi Residences, where peace lives. Leora ran her fingers along the gold lettering. She'd started with nothing but determination and a dream that no one believed in. Now, she owned more than property, she owned her freedom. The phone rang again, but this time, she didn't even glance at it. Some doors, once closed, never need reopening. Yet some nights, when the city was quiet and the wind soft, she thought about Amara. The laughter they'd shared as children. The way she used to braid her hair and sneak her biscuits under the table. There was love there once, buried beneath years of pride. Sometimes, she wondered if that love could ever return. But then she'd remember the cold words, the push, the slammed door. And she'd whisper to herself, "I forgive her." But forgiveness doesn't mean return. Leora's life moved forward. She expanded her investments, started a women's tech mentorship, and quietly funded housing programs for single mothers. Her story became one of whispered inspiration, the quiet millionaire who built homes for others while living in one alone. She never sought recognition. Her peace was enough. And though loneliness visited sometimes, it never stayed long. Her life had purpose. Her building had warmth. And for the first time, her heart felt whole. One afternoon, a delivery came, a letter, handwritten, addressed simply, "To my sister." Leora hesitated before opening it. Inside were shaky words. "I'm sorry. I was proud. I was wrong. I see now how much you gave. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I finally understand." There was no signature, but she recognized the handwriting instantly. She closed the letter gently, folded it, and placed it in her desk drawer. Some apologies don't need answers. Silence, again, became her peace. Spring arrived, painting the courtyard in color. Leora stood by her window, watering the bougainvillea vines she'd planted herself. She looked down at her tenants, families laughing, couples holding hands, and smiled. "Home," she whispered. "This is home." She didn't think about Amara anymore, not with anger, not with regret. Just distance and peace. Her story wasn't about revenge. It was about rebirth. Every year, on the anniversary of buying the building, she held a small celebration in the courtyard. Neighbors gathered, music played, and lights shimmered under the dusk sky. To new beginnings, she'd toast, her voice steady. No one there knew the full story, and she preferred it that way. The past had built her, but it no longer defined her. She smiled at the sound of laughter echoing off the walls she'd once painted in solitude. The building stood tall under the evening sky, lights glowing from every window. Leora walked through the courtyard one last time before heading inside, her heels clicking softly against the tiles. She paused at the fountain, watching the reflection of her own home ripple on the water's surface. "They called me a failure," she thought. "But I became everything they said I couldn't be." She smiled faintly, whispering to herself, "I chose myself and I won." The night breeze lifted her hair as she turned toward her penthouse, her sanctuary, her empire, her peace. And please don't forget to tap the bell, so every new folktale reaches you first. Tell us in the comments what you think about the story. And tell us where you're watching from. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share this beautiful story with friends, family, and loved ones so they too can remember.